Well, hey there and hello. It's the Planet LP podcast. I'm Ted Asregadoo, and here we are, episode 115, and it's all about The Who. Well, one specific album. And when thinking about this one specific album, which happens to be Who Are You?, it's probably not in most Who fans' top two. Maybe it is, but for most people, they're going to pick other ones like maybe Quadrophenia or Tommy, and that's in their top two. Yet, to me, it's an album that is an important one in their catalog because it was the last album where the original lineup was performing. Because shortly after its release, its drummer, the Who's drummer, Keith Moon, had died. Speaking of when the album was released, it was released on August 18th, 1978. 47 years later, Who Are You gets the deluxe box set treatment as the band finally calls it quits in 2025 after calling it quits in 1983, only to tour on again and off again throughout the decades right up until this year's This Song Is Over tour that had what's left of the original lineup, and that's Pete Townshend and Roger Daltrey, saying goodbye to their fans, doing sort of a greatest hits tour, which was essentially this last tour. If you looked on Setlist FM or anything like that, the set list wasn't anything really that deep. It was probably the like I said, the greatest hits, the crowd pleasers. So for casual fans, that is okay, right? You're going to go hear some of those songs that you really, really like. But for the more hardcore fans, maybe not so good. And speaking of hardcore fans of The Who, Jason Hare is here. He is my guest on the Planet LP podcast, and he's here to talk about The Who's box set, well, deluxe box set of Who Are You? I'm going to be honest with you for a moment. Sometimes, even for a music aficionado like myself, I want somebody else to drive, to take the wheel, to just play something that's interesting. I get tired of curating playlists. That's a confession. But I think I have found the station that does just that. That is, I can let them take the wheel. It's Steve Fox's Old School at stevefoxoldschool.com. Well, what are you going to get if you go to Steve Fox's Old School? You're going to get classic soul from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. You're going to get some tasteful R&B. You're going to get some of those classic hip-hop tracks and some surprising disco numbers that make you want to say, this sounds great. So let Steve Fox's Old School take the wheel. Whether it's a party or you're at work or you're just working in the backyard and just want some me time and a good soundtrack to take you through the day. It's Steve Fox's Old School at stevefoxoldschool.com. They are a proud sponsor of the Planet LP podcast, and you can get them on TuneIn Radio or at their website, stevefoxoldschool.com. Steve Fox's Old School. Jason Hare, who are you? Or I should say, how are you, my friend?
Hello, Ted. Thanks for having me on, and thanks for indulging me, because your listeners should know that this basically came about because I wanted to talk about this album and this box set, and I was like, this is good. I can think of the best place to do this. It's going to be with Ted, because we've talked before about The Who. We chatted about Pete Townshend a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
well,
so
we also talked about the Who's sort of post-Moon albums. I think we kind of ranked them, and which of them, they're not that many, right? It's like, what,
that's
3?
Right. You're four, I think.
Four. Yeah. 4 of them, and that's it. And so they've kind of called, I mean, they're what, 82? 81 and 82 now?
Yep, they're in their 80s, and I don't think they are going to find it worth it to record another album. The industry has changed. Their interest levels have changed. The finances have changed. So I think we probably have what we have. And I was really excited to talk about this album because I think it's a really interesting album. And this box set for serious Who fans is a real treasure. It's really what we wanted. It's more than what we wanted. We'll get into it, but it's a lot of stuff that we didn't know anything about, which is very rare. So much of the Who's material has been bootlegged and released in a number of different forms, many different times. But there's stuff on here that was completely new to people. And that's part of what makes it so exciting.
When this album first came out and you were asking me, had I seen, have you heard this yet? And I went on Apple Music because that's what I use for streaming music. I
Yep.
pay like a one lump sum fee, and I'm like in the Apple universe so heavily now. They
Same.
take a lot of my money every month.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of, admittedly, I just did like a cursory glance of the track list and what was included. And all I saw, which my mistake, was a lot of live music or live performances. And I thought, well, what's new here, Jason? And you were like, well, there's a lot. And then you started pointing out some of the things, like even some of the rehearsals. But what I have today off because of Veterans Day. We're recording this on Veterans Day. And I took a walk today and I listened to the second disc, which is the Glenn Johns mix, which I think has some of the vocal takes where Pete Townshend sings some of the songs that Roger takes, like New Song and Who Are You? And there's, I think I'm missing a couple, but anyway, there's a lot of Pete Townshend singing on this. And I was like, oh, well, that is new. I haven't heard that before. And I'm not a Who completist. I'm not part of any kind of forums that trade files or anything like that. So I've never heard any of this before. Have you? Have you heard some of these vocal takes?
Some, but not all. And I am in with that. am in with a lot of that group. However, I would not consider myself a complete expert on the Who, but I am a big fan, and I actually quite like this album. You said in the opening there that most people would not rank this in their top 2, and I think that's accurate. But I would say that I listen to this album more often than I probably listened to the one that preceded it, Who by Numbers, which is a great album in its own right. I listen to it more than I listen to the Who Sell Out or A Quick One or My Generation. So it's probably, and then you start running out of albums. But like I would put it up there with Quadrophenia, Who's Next, Who Are You, and Tommy, right? Those are probably the 4 that, to me, that period, those are the 4 that I really go to. And this album is just a very interesting album for its historical place, right? Because it, as you had said, it is the last album with Keith Moon on it. And then things take a different turn. And so I think it's very interesting for that reason. It comes out of a period where the Who had been kind of fallow for a period of time. And I think some of the things that Pete was struggling with, as always, Pete's struggles come out in his music for Roger to be the muse for. And we heard some of that on Who by Numbers. And we continue to hear some of that on this album. And we get additional elements as well. We get string sections that we hadn't heard a lot of in previous albums. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on here.
One thing you don't hear is a ukulele, which you did hear on Who by Numbers, which was kind of odd. Yeah.
Well, Who by Numbers was sort of a synth-free album. There, as far as I recall, I don't recall, you've got obviously Who's Next, synth heavy on Bob O'Reilly, Bargain, Won't Get Fooled Again. Quadrophenia, super keyboard and synth heavy all over the whole damn thing. I think everything feels very organic to me on Who by Numbers. And then you go back to synth work on Who Are You, including some of the most iconic synths of all with the backing track to the title track.
Yeah, I remember when this record came out, I was barely 13 years old. And where I was at 13 musically was basically the rock group Kiss and whatever was on pop radio. That's it. I mean, I didn't really listen to much, probably a lot of disco because my sister was really into disco. So, but my brother, who's 2 years older than me, he's my middle brother. I have an older brother or oldest brother. He was getting into the radio business or the industry through his high school radio station. Plus he had just gotten some professional work. So he was actually working professionally in radio. He got a promo copy of Who Are You? And he brought it home just like he did with a lot of records. I talked about this on a previous podcast episode where I was talking about Rush, and now my brother Steve was instrumental in introducing me to Rush because he brought home a promo copy of Permanent Waves. So we had the album Who Are You? And I didn't know much about the Who other than what I heard on the radio and what I saw on the screen version of Tommy, which my father took us to see it.
That might burn something into your brain.
It was very strange. I want to say that it came out at the same time as Jaws, but I'm not sure. Did it come out in
75? It was 75, okay. Yeah.
Because we were trying to get in to see Jaws and it was all sold out. So he bought tickets, and I brought my friends, and he bought tickets to see Tommy because that was the only other movie that was available. And we sat there just freaked out about, baked beans coming flying through the screen. Was it Anne Margaret or whatever?
Yeah. Was crazy movie.
Yeah, it was very strange. So my sense of the Who was sporadic, but this album maybe was the one that I paid attention to the most because my brother brought it home. It seemed important. I was an impressionable my first years of my teenage years officially. And so I listened to it, which I loved, the title track. Yeah. But I loved New Song when I first heard it. I thought it was kind of a cool, like bouncy little song. I didn't really know what he was talking about. But I like the guitar work, even though it uses some kind of filter. So the guitar sounds a little more, I don't know, compressed in a way, which I thought was kind of cool. I really liked the way that sounded. But I know that when I said it's probably an album that's not in people's top 2 is because of, you said, where they were as a group in 1978. I mean, they were feeling like they were past their prime. They were feeling old. And these guys were in their 30s. And it's just like, oh my God.
That's right. But they had been going and going and going with very little break since the early 60s, right? Since 60, I can't remember what year, 62, 63, 64, somewhere around there. And this is where my non-Who expert part shows, because with a lot of bands, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the early stuff. I am fascinated by bands in transition, right? I'm fascinated by the period when Chicago turned into a different band. That's the kind of thing that
when they became like a soft rock band instead of
I just think it's interesting. Like I just find something interesting about that period where a band has to navigate a change. And the Who weren't quite there yet, but if we think about where they were when they came to do this album, they had released Who by Numbers in 75. They toured through nearly the end of 76, and then they kind of took a break. Roger went off to record a solo album. Pete did Rough Mix with Ronnie Lane, their solo album, and Keith went off and just got into trouble, really, and just kind of left to his own devices and off tour. He just went off the rails, and it showed when they eventually got back together in 77. They started thinking about The Kids Are All Right, the movie, the movie that came out in 78. And for that, they got back together and they rehearsed and they filmed a show, or they recorded a show for Jeff Stein, the director, and the man behind The Kids Are All Right at Kilburn in London in December of 77. And that show not a lot was known about that show for a long time. A version of My Wife was on the Kids Are All Right soundtrack, I believe. Through a friend of mine, I actually had a bootleg of that show decades before it became publicly traded around. And someone had given it to me and said, do not give this to anybody. And I think I kept my word for the most part on that. But I will say that show was a sloppy show, and it was apparent that Keith was not in good shape. And so this album is different because Keith's drumming is not up to what it was in the 60s up until Quadrophenia. Things start to slow down a little bit, I think, after Quadrophenia. However, I think what this box set shows us is that he was ultimately getting back into shape better than we had thought. Mm-hmm. And we didn't really have the proof to know that until this came out. So at the same time, Pete is he's reckoning with being away from his having been away from his family for so long, and having that break off the road from the Who, he's got a chance to go back to his family. And they get back and they record this album, and they're not planning on a tour. And Roger is in support of that, because Keith is not in the best shape to tour. He needs to get himself, way back into better shape if he's going to tour. Even though Roger very much wants to tour. But they go and they do this album, and the promotional train starts running. As you had said, the album is released in August of 78, and less than a month later, Keith Moon is dead.
Yeah.
And then the band has to figure out what to do, and they figure it out almost immediately. And within a year or so, they're back on the road, and that's reflected in this box set too.
I think that one of the things you touched on about a band in transition is also Pete Townshend, a songwriter in transition, and understanding that at the time they finished the tour for Who by Numbers, they took a break. The music culture, especially in England, had changed pretty dramatically. 75, 76, 77, you saw the rise of punk music.
Yep, Sex Pistols.
Sex Pistols. The fashion was different now because it was a very punk vibe that is. I guess you could call it fortunate to have been in England in 1977 when punk was sort of at its apex. And I was at King's Cross Station and I got to see the punks. And I was just this kid. I was just a little kid then, 12 years old, bopping around on my skateboard and all that. But it was in a lot of magazines around, like where we were staying with my grandmother. It was kind of an intergenerational home, in that my uncle and cousins were also living there. It was a fairly big place. And just as a sidebar, when I read Roger Daltrey's autobiography, he talked about his best mate lived on this certain street, and he had the address. So I Googled it, and it's a block away from where my grandmother lived.
Huh.
In the next street over. And I was just like, wow. Oh my God. What a small world. I was just thinking, because they lived in Shepherd's Bush. So, and that's where Daltrey grew up. And I told my uncle, who had lived with his mother then, and he moved to England, and when he was, I think he was 13 at the time. So this is probably 1965, and I was teasing him. I said, "You could have gone to Gold Hawk Road. You could have seen the Who, and just starting out." And he goes, "Oh, right, a little skinny Guyanese brown kid going down to Gold Hawk Road." Tried to see the Who with all those mods. I would have got my butt kicked, But it was just so odd. I don't know how I went down that road for a minute, but what I wanted to say was that a band in transition, yes, they were a band in transition because the culture had changed, and it's reflected in this music, because I hear so much of what Townshend is expressing is his irrelevance. And from what you were able to dig into with some of the history of where Townshend was at this point, he was feeling kind of irrelevant. I mean, I don't think that he felt like the Who as a group would ever have the kind of cultural command that they did prior to this.
Yeah.
Maybe he thought, oh, shoot, like in New Song, he says, my hairline's not exactly superstar, but he's just talking about playing the same old songs, and that's how he feels. It's like,
yep.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know. It's just one of those things where as reflecting back in some of the comments you make, I realize, they were feeling kind of irrelevant, and they were in transition. They were trying to figure out who they were in the cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah. We started seeing hints of that with Who by Numbers. If you think of like a song, They're All in Love. Pete's got a line, goodbye all you punks, stay young and stay high. Hand me my checkbook while I crawl off to die, or I think that's the lyric. And that's part of it, right? But yeah, you're exactly right. First of all, there's a song about music changing on Who Are You? There's Music Must Change, which ironically does not have any drums on it, because they always say it's because Keith couldn't play in 6/8 time. I think that's bullshit. I just think he could not get the feel and the vibe and line up his style of playing with this song. He just couldn't get it. So they kept it off of him. They kept him away from it. But New Song is, I think, a great example, Ted. Like, first of all, I love that song. I've always loved that song. I think the version on this box set with Pete singing is great. That's actually when they announced the box set, I think probably like the Friday after they announced the box set, they teased that song and they released that song on Spotify as a standalone, just so that people could get a taste. And I was, that's one of those things where we knew there was a demo to the song, because there's always demos to Pete songs. And since the mid 90s, I've had all of Pete's Who Are You demos on bootleg. They've been bootleg. They're I've heard them before, but this isn't a demo bootleg. This isn't a demo take. This is Pete's version of the vocal against the Who backing track, as if they were, and I don't know this, but as if they were saying, well, is this going to be a Pete song or is this going to be a Roger song? Right. It's not I don't think it's a guide vocal. I think it's literally them saying, who's going to be the one? Let's try it both ways. Let's try it with Roger singing it. Let's try it with Pete singing it and see which one we like more. And ultimately they went with Roger, and that's a great choice, but Pete brings a different flavor to it. Which I really love. And in that song, my favorite song in that, my favorite line in that song is nothing really ever changes, my friend, new lamps for old. And, he's it's such a meta song, right? He's talking exactly about his songwriting process, right? This is exactly what I'm going to do and say and sing. And everybody wants to hear it. Everybody wants to cheer it. Right.
Yeah. So I agree. I think New Song is a favorite of mine as well on the record. I'm going to hold this up for people who are watching this on YouTube, but I bought this Lifehouse. It's called Lifehouse Elements, and it's got a version of New Song on here. I'm guessing it's the demo.
Yeah, that's the demo.
Recorded. It is. So if
I believe it is.
Okay, we'll just go with it's likely. It's very likely the demo.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I heard, like you just said, the one that's on the box set with, it's the Who backing Townshend on vocals, right? So it's the backing track exactly as you hear on the record, but they just different vocalist. And I hear Pete doing some good takes on there. I don't know how many vocal takes they did on this, but some of the verses came out pretty good. But I'm so used to Roger singing it that when, like even just like a woo, when he does that, it's like, that's missing. That's great. When I heard that, when Roger does that.
Right. Roger was in great shape for this album.
He really was. He had,
just sounds tremendous.
Just a very big voice. Probably just, it felt aggressive. That's how it felt to me. Just like it had a kind of, I just felt a little different from previous albums, especially like on Who Are You? It just felt like, oh wow, this guy, watch out, this guy's he's gonna take you down with this.
Yeah. So, it's a sneer throughout. A lot of these songs have a sneer to them. New Song, Who Are You? Guitar and Pen. And then, at this point, Roger had released solo material that was different from The Who. So it was exploring more of a soft rock side. He had worked with Leo Sayer, and you get a little bit more of a gentle vocal on a song like Love Is Coming Down. You get to see the height of his command of his range on a song like Music Must Change. Music Must Change, where he's singing super high at some points, but then at the outro to each chorus, he's got a growl of the word change super low. I just think it's a command performance from Roger all the way through.
I agree. I bought probably you bought this too. This is the 1996 version of Who Are You? I'm holding it up to the camera so people on YouTube can
that
see
was
it.
That was the first reissue.
The first reissue, but it also had some additional, it had like a lost verse of Who Are You on there. And it also had the Who's version of a song that ended up, well, it's the title track of Pete Townshend's Empty Glass solo album.
That's
and
right.
They do Empty Glass, which it's so different because, well, first off, you have Entwistle and Keith Moon as your rhythm section, and you've got Entwistle doing these bass harmonics.
Yes, the harmonics,
which is kind of cool. It's like
opening with them.
Yeah. What's that?
Opening with them. The song opens right with those harmonics, and you're like, oh, that's an interesting element.
And Moon's drumming is serviceable. It's fine. It's a lot of fills and things, and it's not. It's certainly not Quadrophenia great, but it's fine.
Right.
And then when I heard it, I thought, gosh, it's almost like I'm hearing a new song again because I'm so used to the solo album version that this one feels a little different. It's not as aggressive. It's a little bit more, I don't know, meditative in a way.
Yeah.
But still a really interesting contrast because I was glad I bought this because this came out in like 96. So this thing's like 29, almost 30 years old. But I don't know if they remixed it or remastered it. I don't think they remixed it. I think they remastered it. They probably punched it up from the original CD release. But yeah, so those are some of the high points for me with regards to hearing Who songs in a different form. But now we've got even more with this deluxe box set because not only does Townshend take the lead on a lot of these vocals, but something that you talked about a little earlier, which was Keith Moon's drumming. Yes, he was dealing with the throes of alcoholism. It was affecting his playing. He wasn't as good anymore. He always was kind of a savant behind the drums. He really, if lore has it, he only had like maybe one lesson, maybe half a lesson at that. Somebody showing him what to do, but he certainly was unique. But when I hear the rehearsals, you do hear Keith Moon not phoning it in. He seems kind of locked in at times on some of these rehearsal takes.
Absolutely. Yeah. We should discuss all that. But I think the one thing that we haven't mentioned yet about the album Who Are You is John Entwistle. We just talked a little bit about his harmonics, but I think we would be remiss in not mentioning that this is a rare instance where we have 3 John Entwistle songs on a Who album, which we had not had before, right? You've got, I think, one John song on Who by Numbers. You've got nothing on Quadrophenia. That's a Pete album. You've got My Wife on Who's Next. And then going back, you've got, some tracks here and there, but you've got 3. John submitted some, and by the way, of those 3 songs, which are Had Enough, 905, and Trick of the Light, I think those are 3 super strong songs. John sings one of them. He sings 905. Roger sings Had Enough and Trick of the Light. And I think all of those songs are very good. I particularly love 905 musically, and I love Trick. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, is that like a song that he was going to work on an actual concept album on, and that was the idea?
I believe so. I believe he was thinking of like a science fiction, like space opera. And if you listen to the demo of it on this album, and we can go into a little bit about why we've got John demos on here, which we've never really had on I don't believe on a Who deluxe set. This is the stuff that was approved by the band. They said these are all really, really strong songs for this album.
My issue, I said it to you in an email about Trick of the Light. I said it's a little pathetic, He's
oh yeah,
and again, he's a guy in his 30s and he's trying to ask a hooker, did I do all right? Did I take you to
Mm-hmm.
the heights of ecstasy? And she's just like, please, this is my job. You're just another John.
Right.
He said, yeah, cute story.
Which I love. It's a good song, and it's a heavy, like musically, it's a heavy song, right? Like there's some when Pete talked about this song right after "Who Are You" came out, he called it heavy metal. I don't know if it's heavy metal, but it's a heavy song.
I was tasked on this podcast to sort of look into how, by my producer Jason Hare, to look into the reaction. How did the public and the critics react to this album? Well, the public reacted very well because this album, I think, went 2 times platinum in the United States, did probably the same kind of business in UK, went gold in Canada. So it didn't lack for its fans, and people flocked to it, and it got sizable radio play. Certainly, "Who Are You" was a staple of FM rock radio. Sister Disco, another one that got played a lot. So I remember those 2 songs being on sort of high rotation on album-oriented rock stations I was listening to back when I was a teenager. And certainly "Who Are You" has never really gone away. They still play that song like crazy
Oh, sure.
on classic rock. Now on to the other part of my task, which is to say, well, what was the critical reaction? And interestingly enough, there wasn't a lot written in the main publications or music journal or music publications at the time, except for Rolling Stone. And the critic who wrote the review for Rolling Stone was Greil Marcus. Never heard of him. I say jokingly.
Mm-hmm.
So he reviewed it on October 19th, 1978. So Keith Moon had already passed away by then, or had died. And I'll just read, I'll link to the entire review in the show notes, but I'll just read a portion of what he wrote. He says, at least 4 songs, all Pete Townshend's, begin with the premise that the band's and its audience's future can't be taken for granted, with doors slamming all around. Townshend feels his weakness, his obsolescence. New song, the first cut, rams home the guilt of having taken a free ride. Quote, I write the same old song with a few new lines, and everybody wants to cheer me. He got that wrong. It's to cheer it. Right. Music must change, might be announcing the need for a new wave, but it's quite consciously 2 years out of date. And what's more, the music itself sounds old and stiff. There's not a single musical concession to punk, reggae, or even hard-nosed rock, which you said that's not quite true if you're looking at Had Enough. In guitar and pen, Townshend clings to his vocation as the man who has something to say, something worth the time others will take to listen, but very intentionally, he protests too much and subverts his own affirmation. I'll close with this. And he says, and then there's Who Are You, a far stronger signal than Squeezebox, the hit from 1975's The Who by Numbers, and a song that, stretched out over more than 6 minutes on the LP version, is far more moving than Won't Get Fooled Again, the band's certified 70s masterpiece. The dynamics are much more subtle this time, and all the smugness is gone. There's a reason for that, isn't there? That he's not so smug now.
That's right.
Because he doesn't feel like he's at the top of the world. I mean, Who Are You is kind of, it's autobiographical, right? He did go on kind of a drunken binge.
Yes, after hanging out with members of the Sex Pistols.
Okay, so did he woke up in like a gutter or something like that, like in Soho?
And supposedly a policeman said, if you can tell me who you are, I won't take you in.
Oh,
I won't take you to jail if you can tell me who you are.
And so that's where the Who Are You kind of comes from, right?
Yeah. I think it's a phenomenal song. Is it overplayed? Sure. Is it on CSI? Yes. Is it, will we ever hear a Who concert? Have we heard a Who concert in the past billion years?
20+ years
without that song? No. Do I care? No. Because I love it. I think it's a super strong song. He took his insecurity and put it into that song, along with finding a really freaking cool synth track and structured it around that. And that's just, and you can hear more of that synth track than I think any of us have really ever heard on the rehearsal takes as well. So
yeah, on Psycho Derelict, he kind of resurrects that synth track as well.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Yes, on one of the Meher Baba M3
right.
or whatever it's called. One of those tracks. Yes, you can hear that. You can hear that synth track. What I wouldn't give to just get my hands on that synth track, just to hear it all alone.
Yeah, it would just be interesting to hear how he kind of came up with that. I know he had his own home studio and he used to tinker a lot with just, various ways of manipulating the synthesizer so it comes up with new and interesting sounds.
Yeah.
This one, I don't know, except for people that sample it like Big Audio Dynamite. I don't know of anybody that really has kind of played around with the synth like Pete Townshend has and used it in a way that here's a rock band that, is very guitar forward, very drums, very, very vocal forward. But then suddenly the synth starts coming in new and interesting ways. And he doesn't so much repeat himself. Well, he kind of does a little bit here and there, but he doesn't really repeat himself when he uses the synthesizer throughout a lot of the Who songs.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with you. Yeah.
What do you think of Sister Disco? What do you think of that song?
I like it. I like it a lot. I just think it's a fun song. Again, synth swirling all around that. What do I love about that? Or what do I think of that song? Well, I love that Pete sings the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
I love the guitar work on it. It's a very synth heavy song, except for coming out of the bridge. There's a little guitar interlude, and then it closes with some of the most beautiful acoustic guitar playing from Pete Townshend. I love that.
Agreed. I don't think I ever get tired of hearing that song because they do a lot of different things. And I think that the contrast between the synth heavy and then going to just an acoustic guitar at the end, and then also the trade-off in the vocals, which is not unique for the Who. They do that often where Roger will sing, the majority of it and Townshend comes in here and there. But I felt it was like one of their strongest songs. I don't know, emotionally, it kind of, for me, it hits kind of all the right notes. And I thought Sister Disco, like, okay, I'm going back to my teen years. Sister Disco, what is it? Does it like the disco people? Is that what it is?
Right.
I couldn't quite figure it out. But like anything with Pete Townshend, he's always trying to like, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? I'm so miserable. I wish someone would love me,
Yeah, I love that song. I loved it even more when they played it live, which they could do that once they got. That's a song where they did not use their synth backing track, but they used their keyboardist, their new keyboardist, who was brought into the fold in '79, John Rabbit Bundrick, and Rabbit played a killer organ over that song. And then they extended the outro out, which you can hear on the live tracks, where they added sort of a coda where Pete and Roger would sing a very tight harmony, sort of, not a chorus, I guess it is a coda, to end the song. And I love that as well. So yeah, big fan of that song.
Do you think that the band regards this album sort of in a positive light? Because except for Who Are You, I don't think they've really played much of this record on subsequent tours. I mean, I haven't looked through every Setlist FM concert of the Who, but I get a feeling like maybe they put in Sister Disco, maybe they had New Song in there a couple times, but or maybe had enough. I'm not sure.
Well, no, you're right. Well, two answers to that. And I'll start with the second part, which is in terms of like, what did they play? So Who Are You? Obviously that's a given. Trick of the Light was played occasionally on I believe the 79 tour. I'm not sure if it made it past there. And it was also played when they reunited in 89. Sister Disco was played a lot from 79 to 82. And I think it was played a handful of times in 89. And I honestly, I can't remember if it's been played since then, but that's it. But I think that's it. In terms of how it's regarded, it's funny that you mentioned that, because one of the possessions I've had for a number of years is this really wonderful interview that Roger, Pete, and Keith did with Scott Muni, who legendary DJ from WNEW in New York City. When the three of them, John was not a part of this, but when the three of them were out kind of doing a promotional tour in August of '78 for Who Are You, Roger showed up to the studio to talk to Scott Muni, and Keith and Pete showed up later. But in that, the album has not even been released yet, and Roger is already talking about how he doesn't love the album. So he says right there, I think Quadrophenia is better than this album, which is such a funny thing to say about an album that you are there to promote. Like, you're already saying we've done better.
Right.
Now,
right.
But I'm not. But that's all I can say about how they regard it, and I don't know how they feel about it now. One thing that's interesting about this box set is what seems to me to be a lack of involvement from Pete Townshend, because if you'll notice on this thing, there are no Pete Townshend demos on this album, which is very different from Quadrophenia's box set, Who's Next box set. The rumor I've heard is that Universal was not willing to pony up the amount that Pete wanted to give them the demos, but I don't know if that's actually true or not. But that's what I heard, because Pete could have, I mean, this is a 7-disc set. You could have filled an 8th and potentially a 9th disc with Pete's demos and other songs for Who Are You. Instead, you get some of John's demos, which is great.
Circling back to Roger Daltrey's view of the record, I get the feeling like from this period, maybe onward, he's not a fan of what they're putting out, because when they did It's Hard, he felt like they should not have done that record at all. He thought it was a mistake. And I thought, I actually like the record. I think it's pretty good. And I think he kind of likes Face Dances.
Well, should we talk about the contents of this box?
Let's talk
about what's on there. If there are people who are on the fence about listening to it or getting it, and if you're a casual Who fan, this is probably not the thing for you.
It's probably a little too much, right?
That's right. It's reasonably priced, more than the Who's Next box was, and I think it might go down in price in the next few weeks or months. But it's really interesting. If you'd like, I can start rambling about that, or feel free to.
Yeah, let's. So disc 1 is obviously just the proper release from.
It's the release. That's right. And I've listened to it on Apple Music like you have, mainly because I have AirPod Pros, and this is the only way I can get access to a Dolby Atmos mix, which was done by Steven Wilson, who I think also worked on Who's Next. I very much enjoyed it. I thought it was a very good version of it. I heard a bunch of stuff that I had not heard before, and I enjoyed that. I heard little nuances on songs like Music Must Change circling around in my AirPods, and it was like, oh, this sounds really good.
I have yet to hear a proper Atmos mix, because I don't have the gear to hear it
Apple
correctly.
Branded. Yeah.
I haven't plugged down how much is for the actual headphones? Are those like $500 or something like that?
I don't know how much they are. I've got the earbud ones, which I admittedly do really love. And it's a good way to kind of get access.
And that does give you an Atmos mix through that. So that's great.
It does. It does.
So disc 2 is this Glenn Johns mix. What's so different between the two, like what they initially released and then this one?
I'm going to be honest with you. I have not quite figured it out.
Yeah.
Part of this probably because I haven't spent enough time with the Glenn Johns mix. So basically what happened was Glenn Johns turned in a mix of the album. It was always said, I think, that Roger had rejected the mix, but recently I heard that it was actually John that had rejected the mix. for the album. But either way, he did not wind up doing it. It was John Astley, Pete's brother-in-law, who wound up doing the final mixing on the album. So I haven't gotten deeply into this yet. I have not heard much difference. Have you? I know you said you listened to it today on your walk.
Yeah, I didn't hear that much. I mean, in terms of like, okay, I guess I would really have to A and B it, but
Yeah.
I didn't. I just was listening to it, sort of playing it through on a walk today. But what I did like on that was the Pete Townshend ones, like on Guitar and Pan, and
Yeah. So
the fact that they did "Love Is Coming Down" without any orchestra, which was
and had enough without orchestra. Now I know some fans who are very happy about that. Now all of those, I believe, all those orchestrations are done by Ted Astley, Pete's father-in-law. I think it's I'm going to kill myself if I got this wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's Ted Astley who did a lot of the orchestrations for Pete's demos too. So there are songs on Pete's demo albums, right? Those albums called Scoop, and Another Scoop, and Scoop 3. There are songs on those albums like Never Ask Me, and there's a couple of other songs where Ted provided the orchestrations. I personally like the orchestrations, and I miss them when I hear these versions without it, but it is interesting to hear it kind of bare bones Who.
Yeah, I feel like without the orchestration, there's something like a layer that's missing that elevates the song. And I think that's probably why they put it in. Maybe they had both versions and they said, yeah, it needs something extra here because I'm not quite feeling it. It feels a little plodding or something. We need something to spice it up, as it were.
Well, I was just going to say that I think the release of those songs without orchestra could be one of two things. It could be to allow people to hear it without it, but it could honestly also be to pad out the box set a little bit. Like, oh, we could just remove these elements and release it, and we've got a new song.
And then you've got the early run through on Who Are You with the Pete Townshend vocal. So he really only does, I believe, two verses. He repeats the first verse twice.
Yeah, I haven't done a true test of it, but the quality of this vocal feels to me like it's from his demo, and maybe the band was running through it. It doesn't say that on there, but it feels to me like it's the band running through using Pete's vocals from his demo, and the demo's out there. But right. It is interesting to hear the band do it. Disc 3 is interesting in that it's got some stuff it's got a bunch of stuff that's been released before. The Who Are You with the different mix that you referenced, and a different, slightly different version mix of Guitar and Pen. Those were out in 96. Love Is Coming Down is fun. There's some dialogue between Roger and Pete and Keith on there in the beginning. Which is funny because I had heard somewhere, maybe it was on a podcast, I had heard somewhere that the band hadn't all been in the studio at the same time for these recordings because Pete was doing stuff earlier in the morning because he was on a family schedule and Roger was doing things later at night. But there they are talking to each other. You've got that take of Empty Glass. There's that song No Road Romance, which is a Pete song. And it says, I believe it says that it's the version from the Who Are You 96 reissue. Now we're getting super nerdy. It isn't. It is the version on the Who Are You reissue from 96 is Pete's demo. But this version is a true version with John and Keith on it, which I think has only been released once before in Japan. God, this is the epitome of nerding out about really or like ridiculous details. Disc 4 and Disc 5 is where stuff really starts to get interesting in my mind.
These are the rehearsals and some live takes.
Yeah, so disc 4 starts out with a crappy quality but historically interesting bootleg of them playing Who Are You at one of their last concerts. They're not really playing Who Are You. Pete is riffing on the Who Are You concept on his own, pretty much, coming out of a jam in 1976. So they have it on there to be like, hey, this is sort of an embryonic version with Keith playing on it, even though it's it's most likely Keith had no idea that he was playing on a song. He was just following Pete's lead, as I'm sure John was. But after that, you've got the audio takes from these rehearsals that they were doing leading up to, it says, I believe they call it Shepperton tour rehearsals, but I don't think that's what it was. Shepperton is the studio that they had, I believe they had purchased, and they were rehearsing stuff in advance of playing live for their Kids Are All Right concerts, for the concerts they were filming. And these are really fun for Who fans to listen to, because we hadn't heard most of this before. We had heard a portion of, we had heard Barbara Ann, their cover of Barbara Ann, because that was the video of that is in the Kids Are All Right movie.
I'm just not a fan of that one. I know.
Oh, no, it's bad.
I know that like Keith Moon absolutely adored the Beach Boys and thought that the Who should be more like them, which would like, wait, what? We're a bunch of 4 British guys. What do we know about beaches in California? You know,
right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying the material is good.
Yeah.
I want to be clear, right?
Okay.
But this is what this is interesting for from a historical perspective. It's an opportunity to see these 4 guys who have not been around each other with any consistency for a period of time. I don't remember the dates for these rehearsals. I'm sure they're in there, but this is a chance for us to hear them.
1978, it says.
Yeah, it's 70. I just can't figure out when in the year it was, but presuming they didn't do that much together in 77, 76, right. They had toured, but they're getting back together and they're just sort of figuring it out, which means that they're fucking around, right? They're just messing around and seeing how things go. They play a song called Run, 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 which is from A Quick One, the album A Quick One, which they had not played live in the, I mean, maybe they did in the 60s, but they didn't play it live in the late 60s through the 70s. When we saw that, I know when I saw that on the track list, I was like, that's a thing? Like, they pulled out this random song. They do some covers of I Saw Her Standing There. None of it's great, but but you can hear them learning how to play together again. You can hear Keith doing some good stuff. So like if you listen to their rehearsal of the song Drowned from Quadrophenia, but they rehearsed that, he's actually playing quite strong on that. Some of it is really powerful and really loud and good. You can hear them joking around, having a really good time, like in each other's company. During these tracks. And there are 2 tracks on there called Knocking It Into Shape. And this is, I don't know what was going on. You'd have to see the video to know what's going on, but they are making their way through Who Are You, which they had already recorded, but they are making their way. I believe they had already recorded. They're making their way through it as a live track. What is this going to sound like if this band plays this song live? It means that there are extended moments where all you're hearing is a synthesizer while they're doing something else in the studio. And unfortunately, we don't have the video to support that. But you get to hear as they're sort of figuring it out. How many times do we sing this part before it goes to the next part? What does the synth sound like? When do these parts come in? As a hardcore Who fan, to me, and I know this is most of these people that are listening to this are going to be like, not for me, thank you. That's really interesting.
Once you get into the live discs or rehearsals and some of the live performances, that go right up until 1979. Now, will just a casual fan be interested in these other discs? Probably not.
Yeah.
You're going to hear some of the same songs performed more than once. Yeah, like Who Are You? Which is fitting because that's the name of the album. So of course they're going to feature that a lot. But I feel like what you're going to get in this for the super fan is way more than expected, for at least for me. I'm not the super fan. I'm a fan, but I look at all this and I'm like, wow, this is cool. Like you've got some 1979 performances. So clearly Moon's no longer alive.
Yeah.
And So the drummer then is Kenny Jones at this point, right?
That's right. And so you go from these rehearsal takes with Keith. You then go to some live tracks with Keith that were recorded at the same time. If you've seen The Kids Are All Right, their versions of Baba O'Reilly and Won't Get Fooled Again are on there, and they're great, and they're lots of fun. They're great. Other tracks that they recorded that day. And then you go right into rehearsals with Kenny Jones. And I don't know the dates of these off the top of my head, and they've got Kenny Jones and Rabbit, their keyboardist. So now you've got a new band, right? What I think is very interesting is that after Keith died, almost immediately they come out, and Pete, who had been reluctant to tour and I think wasn't sure what form the Who was going to take in the future, all of a sudden has presumably a different perspective on things. They pretty much immediately say, we are going to go on. Keith would have wanted us to continue, and we're going to continue. They hire Kenny. They bring Rabbit in. Now they are a different band. Now they have a drummer that keeps time.
Yeah.
Keith did not do that. Keith forced John and Pete to be the timekeepers while he did his crazy stuff. Now they have got a very strict timekeeper, which makes them a different band. It opens them up to different things. It gives Pete the freedom to do different things. Gives John the freedom to do different things.
Yeah, and I think that was a big change to the point where they could have gone down three roads really. They could have just disbanded and said we're not going to continue. They could have gone the road that they chose, which is to have Kenny Jones be their timekeeper, or they could have found a drummer that sounded a little bit like Keith Moon, that could be kind of wild and unpredictable, and would probably be able to play those Who songs. Now, to me, they kind of found it with Zach Starkey. Zach Starkey was probably too young to join the Who at that point in his life.
That's right. And there's another option, which is interesting to think about, is that one of the people that called up Pete Townshend and petitioned to be their drummer after Keith Moon died was Phil Collins.
Wow. Now that would have been...
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
No. Who knows? Maybe the Who would have had like this really interesting career arc where, it was this mod beginnings to, stadium rock. And then they became more like a Genesis progressive rock band.
I love thinking about the alternate timeline where Phil Collins is the drummer in the Who. I mean, because once you do that, maybe, Genesis probably doesn't continue to exist because the Who is active from 79 pretty much all the way through 82, which means you don't get the amazing Genesis album Duke. But also, who knows if Phil Collins goes on to a solo career in the same way, the butterfly effect, the whole thing changes trajectory. I like thinking about it.
Can you imagine Phil Collins trying to take like vocals on some Who songs? How that would have sounded? Like if they were writing songs where now they have three vocalists. Well, actually they had four because Entwistle sang too. And Moon, I don't know what you would call it, but he did his own thing, his own bellboy type thing. But now you have four vocalists. Like what would have happened? And they're all very different.
That's right. Yeah. I fully believe if he had joined the Who, he would have been totally fine just being the drummer. He would have said, because remember, he was only a few years. He was 3 years-ish into being the lead singer of Genesis. And he always considered himself a drummer.
When did the album And Then There Were Three come out? Was that 78?
76? And Then There Were Three. Well, the first one that came out without Peter Gabriel was A Trick of the Tail, which I believe, I want to say that was 76. But because Lamb Lies Down on, now we're getting real nerdy here. Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, I think was 74. I don't know my Genesis history as well as I know my Who history. But,
well, that's what Google's for, right? So let's see.
Well, while you look that up, I can just say that Phil Collins always considered himself to be a drummer first. Always drummer first. So I think he could have done really interesting things for the Who. Sorry, I'll pause there while you share your research. Where are we
Oh, I'm
on
not
the?
there yet. Keep going.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll go ahead and I'll say that the first couple of years with Kenny Jones are pretty interesting. I think by the time they fizzled out with Kenny, which was 82, things were pretty rote and, in my opinion, pretty boring. And some of that I think is because it felt like Pete was phoning it in through the end of 82 when he was like, this is going to be it for now. I'm not interested in being in the Who anymore. And if you watch the videos from the 82 tour, he looks like someone who is not, it doesn't feel like his heart is in it. But 79 is a lightning tour because they are a band with a renewed lease on life. They are looking at things differently. They are free of the past in a way, because they don't have to conform to the same structure. They did something that I think was very smart, which is that they knew that they had to immediately basically continue, because I think if they hadn't done that, they might have never continued. So they just said, we're going to keep going. Not super dissimilar from when John Entwistle died. And they said, we're going to go on. We're going to continue to keep going, because to be stagnant could have changed things altogether. But they went out there on the 79 tour on fire. Of course, Pete was probably drunk for the majority of it, but they come out, they're able to do some songs they had not done in the past. They bring out a horn section for a couple of songs. Like they bring them out on Music Must Change, which was great. They bring them out on Who Are You, which wasn't great in my opinion, but they're able to play the Who Are You material. And Kenny is able to do that. And he's able to follow Pete as he jams. And some of the jams that come out of the ends of the 1979 sets are really interesting, in that Pete was experimenting with songs that would take shape later. How Can You Do It Alone, which was eventually released in a much tamer version on Face Dances. That's on there. Pete's solo song Dance It Away is on there as coming out of a jam. They're a band with a new purpose and a new mission. And it's really cool on this box set that we get to hear a show, almost pretty much a show. I know it's from a couple of different shows, but we get to hear that material in really good quality, recorded really well. Okay, off my soapbox.
I'm glad you were on there. It helped me find some of that Genesis material we were talking about. So, Trick of the Tail and Wind and Wuthering came out the same year, 1976. And then there were and then Spot the Pigeon. I don't know these records.
That was an EP, I believe.
Okay, that was 77.
Right, and then there were through 78.
And then there was Seconds Out, which was their live album, and then there were three. And then there were three in 1978. So here's my Genesis introduction. I only knew when I was in England in 77 that one of my cousins had the Seconds Out record. I had no idea who Genesis was. I picked it up. I said, "Who is this?" And I think my cousin said, "This is too mature for your taste, my dear Ted. All you like is Kiss. That crap you like, Kiss. You wouldn't get this. You wouldn't understand any of this."
You can't sit through 22 minutes of Supper's Ready, Ted.
Oh, my crazy family. Oh, I got one crazy family story. So the year this comes out, my aunt, uncle, and cousins immigrated from Guyana to the United States. So my family sponsored them to come to the US and eventually become US citizens. And so they lived with us for a few months while they found jobs and got, a place to live and all of that. And Who Are You was on the radio a lot. So my
I bet I know where this is going.
Well, because if you know anything about Guyana, they like to play with language a lot. It's like this. It's not quite like Jamaican English. It's a little bit different, but it's funny. It's very sing-songy and very jokey. And so my aunt probably had no idea who the Who was, but I was like cranking "Who Are You" and listening to it, and and she says, "Who is this band? Who is this band? Who are these people?" I said, "This is the Who." And she goes, "Ah, well, okay." And then she starts saying, "Who calling? Hoot, 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 hoot."
Oh,
And I got really incensed. I'm all like, "No, it's Who Are You?
oh,
Who?"
ah.
And so then she thinks, "Oh, now I got him. Now I can really play with him." So
Oh,
she
that's
just kept
funny.
singing it that way. And I was just
That's
like, "Oh,
funny. Oh, I stand corrected. I thought you were going to tell me a story about how, what's interesting about Who Are You is that, at least in in my recollection of it, that was one of those songs where they managed to get the word fuck on the radio.
they did, yeah."
They,
And they
right?
I
You
don't know
would
how
know.
they did it, but it just is like every FM radio I ever heard at the time was playing that, and I was like, how are they getting away with
Yeah,
this?
how are they getting a pass
Really?
on this? There is an edit of the, and I haven't listened to it on the box set to see if that's version, but there is a "Who the hell are you" edit that
Ah,
Roger sang. But that's not what I ever remember hearing on the radio. I remember
no,
hearing
me
that and
neither.
going, I remember hearing it as as a younger kid being like, they just say "Who the fuck are you" on the radio? Like, so I thought you were going to say that that was
No,
what they wound up
no,
singing, but that's a great
nope. It was
story,
"Who
Ted.
calling? Hoot, 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 hoot."
Hoot hoot
Yeah,
hoot hoot. I love it.
and not
I
"Who are
love
you?"
it.
It's "Who calling?" Right?
Well,
Yeah.
I will tell you, there is something very sing-songy and accessible about that, which is so great about Pete, right? Like, he wrote a super accessible chorus. I know,
Yeah.
when my nephew, my nephew was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old, my nephew was singing "Who Are You." My kids were singing "Who Are You" when they were kids,
Yeah.
because it just fits, right? And I think it's clever in that it's a play on it's a play on the Who, the name of the band, but you've also just got this super accessible chorus. The fact that he wrote that song so many years after they had started is great.
And that it's endured too. I mean, it's
Yeah.
had many lives after its initial release.
Yes. From there, their relevance sinks. They wind up with less songs that are considered staples. You've got "You Better You Bet" and "Eminence Front," and that's it. I want to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
but but um but this album was a strong output. And when, as I said before, when you hear Keith on a lot of that rehearsal stuff, you realize, oh, like, he was getting it back. He was never going to be the drummer he was in 1971 or the late 60s or early 70s. But, you know, I don't know. Could he have gotten more of it back? I always wonder about that. Could Keith Moon have made it to the 2000s?
He was a candle that burned bright. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And it just felt like at the time I read the biography that came out. I can't remember when that book Moon came out. I want to say it was like
Oh,
it had to be
right.
in the 90s, right?
I think that's right. Is that
Yeah.
Tony Fletcher's book, maybe? I
Yeah.
think.
And it just kind of talked about how he would have been a guy that was been diagnosed with, ADHD or something, had they had that ability to diagnose him. And then they said the sad part would have been is they probably would have put him on drugs and he wouldn't have been, Moon the Loon, uh, the kind of amazing drummer that he was for this brief period of time within this group. That, yeah, he wasn't really a timekeeper at all. And I just remember it might have been one of the box sets that the Who released, their 30th or something like that. I can't remember, but there was a documentary that came with it, and it might have been Entwistle who said, I think we had one of the most interesting drummers in rock, that most drummers play across the toms and then, from uh, ascending to descending. He said, but Keith played backwards and forwards, and you like look at the way he had his toms set up. It wasn't the way most drummers have it set up. It's stacked in front of each other. So he would go back and forth and play like that.
Yeah.
And but they would always say that yes, he was not a timekeeper, that we kind of had to hold down the fort, and he was just who he was. It was just the four of them together. I mean, that was, as is the often used phrase and probably overused phrase, that was the rocket fuel right there. That combination was the thing that vaulted them. And you can tell that was the rocket fuel, because after, when Kenny Jones, though a great player and a absolutely, in the pocket drummer, they were a different band and they just didn't quite have it. And there was a lot of reasons for that, like you sketched earlier, with regards to like Townsend just not into it on that last so-called final tour. And he just his heart wasn't into it or in it. One thing before we close out, I wanted to kind of highlight about this period. I think with the start of Who Are You until It's Hard, that to me was one of Pete Townshend's most fertile periods of creative output. I mean, he had not only Who albums coming out, but solo albums. And it's like, how? And he was also, if I'm recalling, he was battling a heroin addiction at the time.
Yep, I believe that's true. Yeah.
And that's really like an impressive amount of songwriting that came out, and some really great songs. I really like his solo work through that period, right up to White City. Really, I mean, I like Psychoderelict just fine, but I found like he seemed like he had found a new life as a solo artist and was having some success at it, and was writing some really good songs. And I think that even Daltrey said, yeah, Pete saves all the good stuff for himself and gives us all the shit,
Well, the through line through this box set is, this is a band that is going through it in one way or another, and it's and the box set as a whole kind of threads this narrative of a band that is they're coming back to this fold, not really sure what they're going to be, not sure if they're going to be a touring band. Pete is not sure what he wants out of this band or where it's going to go, and then but they're still giving it what they can, right? They're still trying. And then something big happens, something life and career changing happens, and they continue to say, we're going to press on. And so when I talk about a band in transition, the arc of this box set is a band in transition.
Yeah. And I think the group has done two things. They've satisfied sort of the casual fans with this final tour, and they've given their longtime fans a real treat with a 7-disc box set with all sorts of stuff that people have never heard. And I think that's a nice way to kind of say goodbye to a career and highlight some of the things that may have never seen the light of day if the fans just didn't hang in there. Did you get to see this The Song Is Over tour? Did you get to?
Yep. No, I did not see them on this current tour. I did think about going, but ultimately time, finances and stuff kind of limited it for me. I believe the last time I saw them was probably maybe 2013, I believe was probably the last time I saw them. The last time they toured with Quadrophenia, I believe I saw them I want to say it was at Barclays Center in Brooklyn. I think that, or it was the Garden. I cannot quite remember, but that was the last time I saw them. But I saw them. I didn't get into them until the mid 90s. So the first time I really saw them was 96, but I got to see them in 96. I got to see them in 97. I got to see them in, a bunch of other times. I saw them in 2000. I saw them in 2002. 2004, 2006. I saw a bunch of shows. So I feel like I've gotten my fill.
That's how I felt. I mean, I hadn't seen them as many times as you had, but I've seen them enough to where I thought, do I want to see them do this one final goodbye of songs? And I looked at the set list. I'm all like, I don't really need to hear these live again. I really enjoyed the last time I saw them in 2019 because they kind of reinterpreted some of the songs, like Eminence Front. I thought they did a really cool job with that. I hope somehow that concert, at least that version, somehow makes it in a proper release. So I can hear that, because I thought, wow, I like the way they're doing this. This is really great. I like the way they did Won't Get Fooled Again. It was a little, more muted, but it still had some power to it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that came out of that performance that I was satisfied with and have it captured on my phone with crappy audio and all. Mm-hmm. But, I replay it every now and then just to hear what it sounded like and think, oh, maybe they will release that. Yeah. But an iconic band, a band that, as I think the trend, or at least what the theme that is what we were getting at, is that this is a band that has gone through a number of transitions, and the Who Are You box set shows them at a particular time where they are going through a transition that they couldn't have known it at the time, but this was it. This was it. From here on out, it was going to be a different band, due to the loss of Keith Moon. But hey, we have the music, and
we do.
That's the good part, and I'm glad that you were able to share the hour and some change with me to talk about this box set, Jason. Yeah, it was fun to chat with you.
You as well. Thanks for indulging me for it. And thinking about the Who's catalog, I can only presume a Who by Numbers box set is coming next. I think it's maybe one of the last ones, maybe that and a quick one are the only ones where they haven't pulled the fans for more money. So maybe we'll talk about those in future years.
Yeah, and then some. Maybe we'll go and talk about Genesis, since they're one of your favorite bands too.
So bring it on. Bring it on.
Okay. All right, folks, that's a wrap. I want to thank everybody for hanging out with Jason and myself. See you soon right here on the Planet LP podcast.